Over Memorial Day weekend in 2009, a GPS collar transmitted a set of coordinates from southern Wyoming, and the location did not make sense. The animal wearing the collar had just crossed Interstate 80. Not a mountain pass, not a wooded river valley, 8 lanes of freeway and the open sagebrush of the Red Desert on the far side, some of the driest, flattest, most exposed ground in the state. The collar belonged to a wolverine, and a wolverine, according to almost everything ever written about the species, has no business being there. It is supposed to live locked into the high country, the deep snow, the roadless backcountry, up near the tree line where almost no one goes. This one was crossing a desert alone in the late spring heat, moving steadily south, away from every place its kind was known to survive. The biologists watching the collar move could describe exactly where the animal was. What they could not explain was the thing the dots on the map kept implying. How far is one of these animals willing to travel by itself? And why do they keep doing it? The animal had a name, or at least a designation, M56. And that single crossing of a Wyoming freeway, strange as it already was, turned out to be one of the smaller surprises in his story. It was only the beginning of it, but M56 was not the only wolverine doing something it was not supposed to do. The year before his desert Arthamran crossing, more than 700 miles to the west, a motion-triggered camera in the Tahoe National Forest recorded an animal that had not been documented in California since 1922. That was the winter of 2008. 14 years later, in 2023, wildlife officials in California would confirm only the second wild wolverine seen in the state in roughly a century. This one photographed across the eastern Sierra near Yosemite. And in 2020, in the mountains of Washington, biologists at Mount Rainier National Park confirmed something no one there had recorded in over 100 years. Not a passing male, a female wolverine with kits, a den, reproduction inside a national park, in a range the species had supposedly been emptied out of generations earlier. 4 animals, a desert crossing in Wyoming, a ghost in the Sierra north of Tahoe, a return to Yosemite, and a mother raising young on the flank of a Washington volcano, each one written off at first as a fluke. Together, they are not a fluke, they are a pattern. And a pattern is exactly the thing no wildlife agency has been able to fully account for. To feel how strange that pattern is, you have to understand what a wolverine is supposed to need. The species, gulo gulo, is the largest land-dwelling member of the weasel family, a compact, muscular animal built for cold and for distance. For decades, the scientific understanding of it has been narrow and specific. The wolverine is a creature of the high, remote, snowbound backcountry. It dens in deep, persistent spring snow. The female digs into snowpack that lingers into May to birth and raise her kits. And the research has tied the animal so tightly to that late-season snow that biologists use it to map where wolverines can and cannot live. Remote, high, cold, buried in snow well into spring. That is the wolverine of the textbooks, an animal so bound to true wilderness that it seemed almost incapable of leaving it, which is why the collar data from M56 was so hard to absorb, because the animal itself had apparently never read the textbook. M56 was fitted with his GPS and radio collar in December of 2008, near Grand Teton National Park in northwestern Wyoming, by Robert Inman, a wildlife biologist then with the Wildlife Conservation Society, who had spent years studying the small, scattered population of wolverines clinging to the Rocky Mountain high country. The collar was meant to answer ordinary questions about how these animals used their mountain habitat. For the first months, it did exactly that. Then, in the spring of 2009, M56 left. He did not wander in circles inside his mountain range. He pointed himself south and walked out of it, down out of the high country and into terrain that, by every rule the science had established, should have turned him back. He crossed Wyoming's Red Desert. This is not wolverine habitat by any definition anyone had written down. It is low, dry, open sagebrush basin, the kind of ground the animal was understood to avoid entirely. Then, over that Memorial Day weekend, he crossed Interstate 80, one of the busiest freight corridors in the country, a river of trucks running east to west across the whole continent, and he kept going south. By June of 2009, M56 had walked into Colorado. He was, as far as anyone could confirm, the first wolverine in that state in about 90 years. Not since the era of widespread trapping had the species been verified on Colorado ground, and here was one, collared, tracked, and unmistakable, standing in it. What made the Colorado arrival more than a curiosity was the route. Because M56 was collared, the researchers who had been tracking him, working with other scientists, were able to reconstruct the path he took, and later published that reconstruction in a peer-reviewed study. The animal had not threaded some hidden chain of snowy peaks south. He had moved through low-elevation sagebrush country, exactly the kind of open, dry, not snowbound terrain the species was thought to require an escape from. The map of where a wolverine could go had just been redrawn by a wolverine who never saw the map. And that raised a question the tidy snowbound model had no answer for. If the animal that supposedly cannot leave the deep snow-high country just crossed a desert and an interstate to reach a new state, how confident should anyone really be about where these animals are and are not? That same question was already sitting unanswered in California. Go back to the winter of 2008, a year before M56's crossing. In the Tahoe National Forest, north of Lake Tahoe, a wolverine turned up on camera. Chris Sturmer, a biologist with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, was among those who worked the case, and the finding was startling on its face. The last confirmed wild wolverine in California had been recorded in 1922 when Warren Harding was president and the Sierra still had grizzlies in living memory. This animal, which the press eventually nicknamed Buddy, had appeared 86 years later in a state where the species was considered long gone. The obvious assumption was that someone had released a captive animal. The genetics said otherwise. Buddy's DNA and his behavior tied him to the Sawtooth Range in Idaho, hundreds of miles to the north and east. He had not been dropped there. He had walked there, an enormous solo journey for the species. Sturmer put the possibility plainly at the time, saying the odds were good that some wolverines would venture south into California out of Idaho. In other words, this was not a freak escape. It was Dispersal, the same engine that would push M56 across a desert the following spring, and Buddy stayed. This is the part that unsettles the tidy version of the story. He did not pass through and vanish. Over the years that followed, more than 24 documented sightings confirmed the same animal was still alive, still there, having effectively claimed a home range of roughly 300 square miles of the Tahoe National Forest, the country between Interstate 80 and Highway 49. One lone wolverine, hundreds of miles from any known population, had not just reached California. He had moved in and stayed for years in a state that officially had no wolverines at all. By now, the skeptic in the room has an objection, and it is a fair one, so let me put it out loud. If these animals are really crossing deserts and interstates and states, if they are showing up and even settling in places they were declared gone from, where is the physical evidence? Where are the bodies? Where are the confirmed kills, the scat, the clear photographs, the collars? It is the right question to ask, and it is exactly the question the record has an answer for. The answer is that we are barely looking. The terrain these animals move through is some of the least monitored land in the country. Vast stretches of national forest and high basin and open range where there is no camera, no sensor, no observer for miles in any direction. Camera networks and survey crews cluster where the people are, near towns, trailheads, and the study areas that already have funding. The empty country in between, the millions of acres of national forest and high basin where a dispersing wolverine actually travels, gets almost no systematic attention at all. A single animal moving through that kind of country leaves almost nothing behind. And what it does leave, a track in snow, a print in mud, melts or fills or washes away before anyone with a reason to care ever walks past it. These are animals that already avoid people by instinct, moving mostly at the edges of the day through the parts of the map we have decided are not worth the cost of watching. What can look like proof that these animals are not out there is usually just proof that no one was there to see them, not enough to confirm, not enough to dismiss. Except in a handful of cases, the evidence does exist, because a collar or a strand of DNA happened to catch it. And this is where M56's story turns, because his collar did not just record where he went, it recorded where he ended. If this is the kind of question that keeps you up, the woods behind your own house, and what might actually move through them, tell me in the comments what you have seen where you live. Give me the state and the animal. And if you want to keep following these cases, the ones the agencies can't close, subscribe and stay with me. Because this next part is where M56's journey stops being remarkable and starts being almost unbelievable. After reaching Colorado in 2009, M56 did not settle the way Buddy had. He stayed in the state for roughly 3.5 years, and then he moved again. The tracking grew thinner as time went on, but the picture that emerged has him drifting north and east, back up through Montana by inference, and then out onto the northern plains. And in 2016, M56 surfaced in North Dakota. Sit with that. According to reporting on the case, no wolverine had been confirmed in North Dakota since the state achieved statehood in 1889. This was farm and ranch country, prairie, about as far from deep snowbound mountain backcountry as the species could possibly wander. The straight-line distance from where he had been in Colorado to where he turned up in North Dakota runs to about 500 miles, 826 kilometers, and that leg alone is cited as among the longest straight-line dispersals ever recorded for a wolverine. He did not get a quiet ending. In 2016, near Alexander, North Dakota, M56 was shot and killed by a rancher who, by the accounts of the incident, did not recognize the animal. Why would he? No one in North Dakota had seen a wild wolverine in 127 years. It was North Dakota Game and Fish that confirmed what had actually happened, and they confirmed it because the animal was still wearing the collar Inman had fixed to him near Grand Teton 8 years and several states earlier. The collar closed the loop. It turned a rancher's unrecognizable dead animal back into M56, the wolverine from Wyoming, and in doing so, it delivered the one thing the skeptic asked for: physical evidence, not of a rumor, of a single animal that had crossed a desert, an interstate, and 4 states, and had been quietly alive out there the entire time, seen by almost no one, recorded only because a biologist had gotten a collar on him before he left. Now hold M56's whole journey in your mind and go back to California, because the state was not done producing wolverines. In May of 2023, more than a decade after Buddy first appeared near Tahoe, California, confirmed another one. Daniel Gammons, a senior environmental scientist with the state's Department of Fish and Wildlife, worked through photographs and video to verify it, and the animal turned up across a wide sweep of the eastern Sierra, through the Inyo National Forest, Mono County, and Yosemite National Park. Officials were direct about the significance. This was only the second wild wolverine confirmed in California in roughly 100 years. Buddy had been the first. This was a separate animal, a separate crossing, a separate lone traveler arriving in country the species had been absent from for a century. And notice what the 2023 case shares with all the others. It is a single individual appearing far outside the known population, in exactly the kind of place the deep snow model says the animal should not be able to reach on its own. And then there is Washington, which offers the one piece of this puzzle that should not exist at all if the other cases were truly flukes. In 2020, biologists at Mount Rainier National Park confirmed a female wolverine with kits inside the park, the first evidence of the species reproducing there in more than 100 years. The following year, they reported a second litter. That detail carries more weight than any single crossing. A lone male walking through a state only proves the animal can travel. A female digging a den and raising young proves the species can arrive, settle, and produce the next generation in country it was declared gone from. She found snow deep enough and late enough to den in on the flank of an active volcano in a park that had not recorded a wolverine birth in living memory. Buddy and M56 had already shown that these animals could reach places the maps had written them out of. What happened at Mount Rainier went a step past that, into actually raising the next generation once they got there. So why does this keep happening now? Why this run of crossings and reappearances, and at Mount Rainier actual breeding, all clustered into the same handful of years? That question is where the story stops, being a collection of remarkable animals, and starts being something stranger, because the answer runs directly against the assumption we started with. Here is the piece that reframes everything. The reason there are so few wolverines in the lower 48 in the first place is not that the land could never hold them. It is that we removed them. Through the era of widespread trapping and poisoning of predators, wolverines were killed out of most of the United States by around the 1930s, stripped from vast stretches of their former range, not by climate or habitat, but by people with traps and bait. It was part of a broader campaign against predators of every kind that ran across the American West for decades, and the wolverine, never numerous to begin with, simply disappeared from the map behind it. The animals crossing deserts and interstates now are not colonizing alien ground. In a real sense, they are moving back into country their species held before we emptied it. That is dispersal doing what dispersal does. Young animals in particular strike out alone to find territory with no other wolverine already in it. And that drive is how the species spreads back into ground it once held. In a wolverine, it works on a scale that is hard to picture, sending a single animal across hundreds of miles of country that means nothing to it except distance to be covered. M56's leg from Colorado to North Dakota, cited among the longest straight-line movements ever recorded for the species, is what that drive looks like taken to its far edge and caught on a collar. He was not lost in that desert. He was searching. But there is a darker turn inside the science, and the biologists who study these animals are the ones raising it. The threat they flag for the wolverine's future is no longer the trapper. It is the snow. Remember that the female wolverine depends on deep, persistent spring snowpack to den and raise her kits. As the climate warms, that late-season mountain snow is shrinking, thinning, melting out earlier in exactly the high places the species relies on to reproduce. Sturmer and Inman are among those on record pointing to it, and that is the paradox this whole story has been circling. In the very decades when these animals are proving they can cross deserts, freeways, and whole states to reclaim ground, the specific thing they need to raise the next generation, the deep spring snow, is disappearing out from under them. The wolverine is expanding and imperiled at the same time, walking back into an old range while the ceiling of where it can actually breed drops lower every warm winter. An animal we spent a century deciding was a fragile prisoner of the deep wilderness turns out to be one of the most far-ranging land travelers on the continent. And just as it starts to prove that, the ground it truly cannot do without is melting. Which brings the whole thing back to the question the first set of coordinates raised over that Wyoming freeway in 2009. How far is one of these animals willing to go alone? We have 4 answers now, and every one of them is an animal we only know about by accident. Buddy, caught on a camera someone happened to set. The 2023 Wolverine, verified from images that happened to be captured. The Mount Rainier mother, found because that particular patch of mountain happened to be studied. An M56 whose entire 4-state, 1,000-mile life is known to us for one reason only. A biologist got a collar on him before he walked away, and the collar was still on him when a rancher who had never seen his kind shot him in a North Dakota field, 127 years after the last confirmed one. Take the collar away, take the camera away, and every one of these animals is invisible. Which means the question worth asking is not really whether wolverines are crossing back into the country we emptied them out of. They are. The record proves it every time the evidence happens to survive. The harder question is the one nobody can answer, because nobody is collaring most of these animals and nobody is watching most of this country. How many M56s have already made the crossing, walked a desert or a freeway or a state line, and finished the whole journey with no collar, no camera, and no one to ever know they were there?